Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Insurance and Real Estate Committee's first public hearing. Thank you all for being here. We have 5 bills today that we're going to be talking about. But before that, I'd like to kick it over to my co-chair for any opening remarks.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Let's get started.
Okay, we'll rock and roll and get going with Commissioner Mays, who's here. Commissioner Mays, welcome.
Always great to be here before the committee. Senator Cabrera, Representative Wood, Representative Barry, Senator Mark, Representative Meskers, Representative Nuccio, Representative Delnicki, and the other distinguished members of the Insurance and Real Estate Committee who may be watching via Zoom. I'm Andrew Mays. I'm Commissioner of the Connecticut Insurance Department, and I do want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of our department's bills. I will start with HB 6433, which is an act concerning captive insurers. This proposal increases the department's ability to regulate captive insurers and provides flexibility to captive insurance owners consistent with the department's goal of being a captive domicile state of choice. We want our captive insurance laws to be appropriate while allowing flexibility for companies to make their business decisions and ultimately better manage their risks and their costs. The flexibility contemplated by the proposal pertains to sponsored captive insurers. And by way of background, a pure or single parent captive insurance company is owned and controlled by its sole insured. The purpose of this type of captive insurance company is to pay its owner's losses and afford the owner more control over its risks and losses that occur. Now, this captive structure is generally an alternative to purchasing insurance coverage from a traditional commercial insurer. While pure captive is perhaps the most common type of captive, the Connecticut insurance law contemplates other captive types that operate similarly, most notably a sponsored captive. And a sponsored captive is a corporate entity formed by a sponsor, for example, an association, a corporate trust, or other entity. It includes a core linked to several what we call protected cells. Now, the cells are established to ensure individual participants or owners, each operating like a pure captive insurance company. Each cell operates independent of the others and the company's core and has separate assets and liabilities associated with its individual owner. Now, with this bill as proposed, a captive insurance company would have the flexibility to convert into an unincorporated protected cell without any impact on the assets, rights, benefits, obligations, and liabilities of the captive insurance company. And in addition, this proposal would allow for protected cells to be sold, transferred, or assigned to a new or existing captive insurance company without any impact on the assets, rights, benefits, obligations, or liabilities of the protected cells. Now, this type of flexibility, I must note, that is afforded protected cells as contemplated by this bill is consistent with the law found in other top captive domicile states. And we know Vermont leads the way. For instance, there's North Carolina and a number of others. And finally, 2 provisions within the bill are intended to enhance the department's regulatory abilities. First, the proposal includes a technical correction that includes captive insurance companies within the scope of the general penalty statute. Correction of this oversight provides the department with an appropriate tool to help ensure compliance by captive insurers. Second, the proposal gives the department the ability to separate insolvent protected cells from a sponsored captive insurer. Now, with this ability, remember the cells are isolated. With this ability, the department can address the insolvency of a protected cell independent of the sponsored captive core if that core is financially sound. In the raised bill, we would ask for a technical change in lines 262 to 263, changing sponsored captive insurance company, that's in quotes, to sponsor for clarification purposes. Next on the list is HB 6435, which is an act concerning automobile physical damage arbitration process. As I've said many times, actually, I've got a Connecticut Insurance Department copy cut here, and on the back, this was issued on our anniversary, and it says 150 years of consumer protection. The core mission of the Insurance Department is consumer protection. And in order to help promote that mission, state law requires the department to establish an independent arbitration procedure for the settlement of disputes between claimants and insurance companies concerning car auto physical damage and property damage liability claims. This independent arbitration is used when attempts at mediation by the department have failed and liability and coverage are not in dispute. An arbitration filing fee of $20 by each party is required by statute. However, since 1989, when this was established, the cost to the department to administer the arbitration procedures have risen substantially. Therefore, we would like to see the insurance writer bear the cost of the arbitration should they lose. And I want to emphasize here, this is should they lose. Shifting the administrative cost to the insurance company is not a new practice. We already require it for the health insurance external review process costs, which are charged by the independent review organization, which is paid by the health insurance company. The department believes that this proposal encourages pre-arbitration resolution of automobile physical damage claims, which will result in a more time-effective process for both consumers and insurers. If we just take a look at recent history, looking at the most recent arbitrations that went forward to a hearing, there were 6 that were found in favor of the consumer, with a total recovery of $15,263.59, we're precise at the insurance department. But if those costs were charged under the new contract for a complete arbitration, the cost for those 6 arbitrations would have been slightly over $18,000 or $3,075 each. Again, you see where the incentive to settle before going to full arbitration is. So the purpose of this proposal is to encourage that resolution of those claims pre-arbitration by requiring that the insurance company and not the department pay the full cost of arbitration if the decision is in the claimant's favor. To facilitate this requirement, we will require that the insurance company make an offer of compromise when the case is in the department's mediation program. And please note that the department's original proposal was modified to require the insurers to pay only the arbitrator's fee and not the non-refundable administrative cost to the department. We do ask that the original language be used, and I think LCO is good with that. Now, moving on to HB 6436, which is an act concerning the health insurance law. The purpose of this proposal is to make necessary technical changes to several sections of the health insurance statutes, and such changes address the needed replacement of a third-party resource identified as an exclusive service provider for the department, address ineffective deadlines, and eliminate an unnecessary regulation requirement. First, this proposal provides a necessary technical update to the authority under the Health Benefit Review Program in the event that the department is tasked with reviewing and evaluating mandated health benefits. The law as written currently requires the insurance commissioner to contract with the University of Connecticut Center for Public Health and Public Policy. Unfortunately, that no longer exists, and there are no alternative resources designated within the current law. We want to replace it with less prescriptive options so that we don't necessarily have to come to you if something like this happens again. Second, the department is charged with collecting data from regulated entities, reviewing the data, and compiling it into reports. And one such report contains data collected from pharmacy benefit managers pertaining to the aggregate dollar amount of all rebates. And there are two deadlines specified in the law related to this report: the date by which PBMs must submit the data to the department, and the date the department's report is due to the General Assembly. However, the current deadline for the PBM data submission allows only 11 months from the prior year, and we need to push the date back to get the full 12 months, so that's pretty straightforward. And third, this proposal makes the adoption of certain regulations permissible rather than compulsory. Public Act 2458 concerning complex rehabilitation technology of wheelchairs mandates the adoption of regulations to implement the law. And upon review of the Public Act, it was determined that additional regulations are not necessary to enforce the statute at this time. So this proposal makes we're seeking to amend the law to make the adoption of any such regulation within the discretion of the commissioner. Our final bill is HB 6437, and that is an act concerning market conduct and licensing. And this bill modifies various insurance statutes relating to the department's licensing and market conduct functions. Specifically, this bill will provide a more efficient, modern method for the transmission of notices and documents. It will allow insurers audits of third-party administrators to be conducted remotely, and improve the insurance commissioner's enforcement authority to address violations by licensees by introducing a time limit for insurers to report to the commissioner cases where they terminate any of their insurance producers for cause. Finally, it would eliminate outdated requirements for insurers to file an annual report concerning their investigations about automobile insurance fraud, and to conduct on-site audits of third-party administrators. And we do have alternative methods now. The info collected by the National Insurance Crime Bureau, this info is collected by the NICB, and it is available to the department. So these changes, the changes that this proposal addresses, are intended to improve and streamline department and insurer processes and promote efficiency. We have provided you with written testimony, and more details are included in the written testimony on this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions? Representative Wood?
Thanks, Commissioner Mays. Thanks for being here. I can't think of anything more exciting than talking about our captive insurance laws. In fact, I don't know if you looked at the testimony, but we had a gentleman from India send in testimony that he was using the model of Connecticut abroad, overseas. So
Excellent.
I just wanted to ask, the separating of the insolvent protected cells from the sponsoring, is that just preparing us for worst case scenario, or have those instances existed?
I can give you an answer as to whether or not those have existed beforehand. We can look through that. We can give you a national answer on that. I'm sure it's happened nationally. But for us, what we need, certainly what I want Connecticut to be when it comes to captives, is there is that combination of being friendly to captives, making sure this is a preferred domicile, but also with strict regulation. Yeah. And we need the authority under that regulation to go in should we have any concern. So by going in, we can protect that cell out. The rest of the captive works well. That there's one individual entity that we're dealing with, and we can protect the ongoing work of that captive.
Great, thank you. In HB 6435, there was testimony that was submitted saying that the assessments on the carriers should be paying for this. I was wondering if you had any comments about that.
That was not how it was originally set up, and I do know that I've had discussions with carriers, as you well know, and there are many who would support an increase in our budget to cover it. What's happened over the years, and I think, I'm not surprised, consumers, as we've gone through the education process, consumers have become more and more aware that this is an option for them. So what used to be a de minimis cost has been significantly increasing over the past few years. We want to make sure that consumers are able to access this and that consumers have no concern about the cost being turned on them when it's accessed. So either way, if we get it through an assessment or if there is, some other way to get it, if the carriers have another idea. But what we do need, especially given the underlying costs, that's the other part of this, the underlying cost of the arbitration has significantly increased. And I will tell you, I think we have some of my staff here. We've had real trouble trying to get arbitrators even at what we're currently paying. So we want to make sure we continue to protect consumers. That will cost money. It is not included in our current budget, and we would like to make sure that that cost is covered.
Thank you. I want to go to the mandated health benefit process. With UConn not being able to do that, say we made that request as a committee to you, tomorrow. Would you go out to a consultant, or do you have a process in mind that you would be able to, access?
I think we would utilize our standard process, which is basically you'll do an RFP, first an RFQ, an RFP, seeing who's out there who can do it clearly. And I probably shouldn't say this, but from my point of view, I would prefer to have a Connecticut entity doing it, and if possible, a Connecticut academic entity. But we have to be able to get it done if we need to get it done. That really is where I am right now. I don't want to be caught up 6 months from now or 9 months from now having to do this and not being able to find somebody to do it. So this is, again, it's planning for the future.
Great. I'd love to talk offline about, how we make that happen so that it's not something that is, all time, consuming or something like that.
Absolutely.
The modernization language in HB 6437 about, kind of going paperless and all that, would you also support the industry asking to go in the same direction?
To a certain extent, yes. And I think, again, we have these discussions with industry, and what I have conveyed to industry, and this stance has not changed during my time here, is that we are all in favor of efficiency. We are all in favor of helping consumers get information and interact with the insurance companies as quickly as possible. However, we do have to protect consumers. So we want an opt-in for insurance companies. They have to go to the consumers, and the consumer has to say, we want to do this. If the consumer says they want to do this, that is one thing. And that's completely fine with us. But what I do not want, and I go back to the idea of my 95-year, my grandmother's 95, and it kind of, she lives with us, and it kind of drives us in. Every time she gets something from an insurance company, guess who she brings it to? And, so if she had to do this online, it wouldn't get done. So it's a matter of consumer protection, reaching and making sure certain communities are able to access the information they need. So that's, it's nuance. It's not a flat yes, It's a yes, but.
No, I appreciate that. And just my last question, the wheelchair language, were the advocates brought in on that discussion, and did they sign off on that?
I'm going to defer to Jim Carson on this one.
Okay.
Jim is my representative on that. And the advocates are aware and are in favor, yes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wood. Representative Nuccio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a follow-up question regarding the state assessment one with the UConn. I think the chair asked most of the questions that I had, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate. I believe the last time this was done was in 2015.
Yes.
And since 2015, there have been several new state assessments that have passed. We have an entire committee now looking at the assessments and the implication of that on the cost of health insurance, which we all know is a really big issue for a lot of our residents. So I would also just request that I'd like to really understand how we're going to do this, and if it's an outside source, how they're going to look at this information, how it's going to be compared to other states, because I found value in that actual assessment. I remember paying that last assessment in 2015 at my company and looking at the information that was provided. And I thought it was very helpful to understand how these assessments are directly impacting the cost of healthcare. And the work that we're doing, I think, is good to see where we can try to bring some of that back into the state budget to reduce those pressures. I don't want this to get lost. I understand that UConn's not doing it anymore, but I think this is a vital function that we should actually be doing every time after every session when this building decides they want to pass a bunch of mandates on healthcare. So do you know any other states that are doing this, and are they using outside consultants? Do they find that as valuable? Just kind of like how do you see this playing out,
I
sir?
could not speak to that off the top unless Paul Lombardo, Paul, do you have any? Paul Lombardo is our Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Life and Health. Paul, please join us and he can fill you in on the more.
That's an
detailed-
awfully small desk for you, sir.
Come on in. Water's fine.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I have one example. California actually has a mandate review board. In California, before the legislature can even contemplate passing a mandate, it has to go through the mandate review board for a benefit cost analysis. That's what I'm aware of in California. That is something that our mandate review was somewhat based off of. Other than the fact that you could pass mandates without, in Connecticut, you could pass mandates without having it go through the review process.
So I do have to say, I'm not one for following in California's footsteps, but as somebody who directly handles state assessments for the entire nation for my company, Connecticut has, I think, 6 or 7, which equate to tens of millions of dollars just my one company is paying, right? So you average that out across all the companies that have membership here in the state of Connecticut. It's a massive number. California has about 2. So I think that's pretty relevant. Theirs are different than ours, and theirs are not nearly as expensive as ours. They are a significantly bigger state. So I say perhaps, chairs, we should look at I hate to say this, but the California legislation to see if there's something there that we can mirror that would help us understand the mandates that we're passing, the impact on cost of healthcare. Be very interested if, Paul, if you could get any kind of information on what their board is made up of and how they're doing those analyses, so we could look at that for improvement of the cost of insurance here in the state.
Sure, I don't think that's an issue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Representative Pavlik D'Amato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 6436, I think it was that you mentioned technical changes, or removal of some unnecessary or obsolete provisions. I don't know if you went into detail as far as what you wanted to remove. And I'm not sure whether those were dates or whether those were, I think, requirements.
6436, one of the issues has to do with dates, and it's not really removing it, it's changing it.
Okay.
Shows the dates right now, that gives companies 11 months to respond. And that really does not give us a full year picture. We want to make sure that we have a full year picture. And the other part has to, and yes, this is aside from the UConn issue. The other part has to do with the wheelchairs, PA 2458, where we were mandated to create regulations. However, those regulations do not seem needed at this time, as I think Assistant Deputy Commissioner Carson noted. Everyone involved, the stakeholders involved, to agree with us that we don't need this at this time. So we wanted to move it to be permissible, because if we do need it, 2 years or 5 years or 10 years from now, then we could issue the regulations.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know why, as far as the Connecticut Center of Public Health and Health Policy, I guess that UConn department you said doesn't exist anymore. I don't know why we're just finding out about that now, unless it recently became defunct. But either way, I know using an outside actuarial firm was something that we had brought up in the past. My only issue is why the change from shall to may on that paragraph, and then there's another one also, I think. But let's say the one lines 19 to 24. And
I
that's,
don't have a copy of the bill right in front of me. Do you have a copy of the proposal?
and it would be on line 20. Just that you may engage the services of an actuarial firm for that.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Part of that is that we need a certain amount of permissiveness in order to determine who we use. I mean, who would be best suited to do it. So I think that was part of the original intent. We do not want to be locked in where we are now, where we've got one designated entity when there were other, when this entity no longer exists, and there may be other entities that are able to do that.
Okay. I can agree to that premise, just not the may instead of shall. So I would prefer to change that back to shall with maybe additional language that doesn't lock you into any specific. That I understand. And I think your preference is, to me, I would defer to your preference. My last, or one of the last questions, you mentioned an opt-in, and I think this has to do with maybe 6437, the opt-in versus opt-out. You would prefer an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in
No.
provision?
For consumers, I would prefer.
Yes. An opt-in provision, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
because if you're not reaching them via their phones or the internet, they may not know they have the opt-out provision. So I'm going to lean on the side of the consumers whenever possible. And I know it is not ideal. You know, clearly we would all want to reduce costs as much as possible. And mail is not the greatest service in the world at this point, but I do think consumers should have the right to make that decision for themselves.
I agree. I think along the same idea that if somebody isn't utilizing that, then they're not going to know where to look and go in. And with the thousands of emails that I have, I assure you, I am not finding probably not going to see it. And just my last question was about the audit, to allow audit of third-party administrators, which I believe was through 6437. If you could just give me an example, maybe just walk me through that.
That's actually pretty straightforward in terms of the way we've changed how we work. And this is something that we're seeing where our regulations for various events are changing. So you don't necessarily have to be on site at a location physically to do it. You can do the audit remotely. We want to, again, this is moving towards more efficiency.
Oh, okay. All right. I see. That clarifies that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Representative Meskers.
Commissioner, I want to thank you for your testimony. And just have the one comment or observation on 6436 concerning revisions to health insurance statutes. And it isn't covered in what you're in your testimony, what's going on currently. Just on a personal note, a personal experience, one of the recommendations among the insurance carriers relates to board certification. We have a tremendous amount of consolidation going on in the industry. Doctors who practice in some cases are grandfathered in. I know of a case where there was a change in ownership and that grandfathering was lost, and therefore the medical practitioner, who to the best of my knowledge had no complaints against their practice, was no longer part of the insurance plan. Going forward, any of the grandfathering of medical practices and any consolidations in the industry, you know, I don't need a report. I don't need to make it onerous, but I want to make sure that the insurance companies, in the broadest case possible, or the hospital systems, as they acquire and merge, that we don't lose licensed practicing physicians or nurses. So I'd like to see the grandfathering honored as people cross in their ownership, because I've seen that happen in one or two cases. And if it's a broad scale issue, we're going to lose providers. It's going to raise our cost of practice. So I just mentioned that as something to put in the back.
I think
going forward.
access to healthcare is a goal we all share.
Right.
I know my own primary care physician, I think it's a third or fourth private equity firm that's a whole member of the
Right.
5 or 6 years. And we do need to make sure as these changes happen that nothing slips between the cracks. We do, as you know, we do get if there are any issues with providers are not necessarily reticent about contacting us.
Right.
And even where it doesn't necessarily fall within our legal authority, we would still reach out to the insurance company to say, hey, what's going on here? What can you do? Are you depriving people of the ability to get service?
But as you mentioned, I think just in light of those kinds of consolidations, I think the impact of the number of providers are still, or the individual licensees are still able to practice, that we're not losing people. That would be just a concern. But in terms of your testimony and your representation, I don't have any, I think you were very clear, and I'm fully in support of the measures you're bringing forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? No, seeing none. Commissioner, thank you so much for your time and your diligence and your team. Always responsive and always willing to talk to us. So thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be,
Have a great day.
especially on a relatively warm day.
I'll take it. Thank you so much. Pick up next online, we have Michael Maglarsi. Am I pronouncing that correct?
It's McLaren's.
Maglaris, sorry about that.
It was very
Welcome, sir.
close.
Go right ahead.
Are you ready for me?
Yep, you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I wanted to address very specifically our support at Michael Maglaris and Company for House Bill 6433. Very specifically, I'm Mike Maglaris. I'm the principal and chairman of Michael Maglaris and Company. We are the oldest continuous captive consulting firm in the state of Connecticut. We'll hit 40 years this August. More than 190 captive insurance licenses we've procured in domiciles throughout the world, including here in Connecticut. And we are very fortunate to have the enlightened leadership of Commissioner Mays and Fenwa Liu, the director of captives. Connecticut has already proven itself to be a formidable and important domicile worldwide. And House Bill 6433 will help improve that cutting edge and improve that competitive spirit with respect to our wonderful domicile here in Connecticut by addressing some needed changes in regulation for protected cell insurance companies, captive insurance companies. Our firm is privileged to operate and manage on behalf of the citizens of Connecticut the Crumbling Foundation Captive Insurance Company, which in fact is a protected cell organization. As of this morning at 9 a.m., we have 1,067 families whose equity in their homes have been restored through the use of a Connecticut domiciled captive insurance company organized as a protected cell. So these changes to regulation about the conversion of PCs from single parents to protected cells, about the permission to sell or transfer assets, will modernize the protected cell structure in Connecticut, make us competitive, and continue to promote our leadership on a worldwide basis. Connecticut Foundation Solutions Indemnity Company, which is the captive we're privileged in my firm to manage, among others, has been written up worldwide as an example of people helping people using a captive structure. And it started right here in Connecticut, and it's prospering right here in Connecticut under Connecticut statutes. So I urge this committee to look long and hard at at Bill 6433, which will create more tax revenue and create more jobs in the financial sector here in Connecticut. And I'm happy to take any questions that anyone may have for me as a representative of the industry.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Representative Donicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony, Mike. You've done a tremendous job with the Crumbling Foundation issue and the captive insurance there. And I have to tell you, your basic approval and commentary pertaining to the changes here ring loud and clear. And I want to thank you for your testimony on that. And 1,067.
Yes.
Amazing number when you think about that. And we're continuing on.
And you and I can remember Representative Delnicki when it was only 67. That's 1,067 families who have suffered through near bankruptcies and tremendous hardship. And a captive insurance company has restored the equity in their home and brought the tax rolls back to where they need to be in the affected town. So we are very much in my firm, as I know you are and others, in favor of anything which streamlines, modernizes our wonderful captive domicile here in Connecticut.
So you wholeheartedly endorse the changes that are being proposed here?
Without reservation.
And
Yeah.
you're convinced that that will actually be a tremendous positive?
Yes, and if I could add one comment, time allowing,
Go ahead.
we are in the middle of setting the stage for the future development of the captive industry over the next 5 to 10 years. One of the driving things, Representative Delnicki, that all of our elected officials should take into consideration is the incredible effects of climate change on the availability of commercial and related insurance coverages. Our farmers here in Connecticut are already feeling it. The
Right.
protected cell mechanism is a mechanism designed for moderate-sized businesses. There are large protected cells, like CIFSIC, for example, but the real, true, good use of a protected cell is a moderate-sized business. And I'm predicting a tremendous need here in Connecticut and elsewhere in the United States using a Connecticut domicile for a protected cell as we wrestle with the significant problems of climate change, the availability of property coverage, flood insurance, business interruption insurance, all of the things that will drive this process. So the modernization and the improvement through 6433 of our protected cell structure is going to drive business to us. In the CIFSIC Protected Cell Crumbling Foundations Program, we have created 225 construction jobs that didn't exist in 2018. So the importance of protected cell structures, preserving that structure, modernizing that structure, is going to position Connecticut to help in what's going to be a significant problem with climate change and captives in the future.
Well, I have a feeling we're going to be having a lot of discussion on that and on what can and can't be done to actually help our farmers and the folks that are becoming victims of torrential downpours, flooding, etc. So keep up the good work, Mike, and I appreciate your comments and your support on that bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Representative Wood.
Just a couple comments. First of all, Michael, thank you for being here. And I did just want to let everyone know that you've been very helpful with our language on the farmer captive bill that this committee passed last year, which did end up passing the House. And we hope to work with you on continuing that discussion. The CIFSIC fund does have an extra cell, and Michael was very beneficial in discussing that language. I also just want to let you know that I was at a real estate function the other day, and the real estate agents were commenting about the quality of the work in replacing the foundations. So just hearing that, you know, like the boots on the ground perspective of people reselling those homes, it was wonderful to hear. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll make sure the staff hears those comments. I am on my way, Representative Wood, in about an hour to a job site in Ellington, because one of the things the superintendent does is show up unexpectedly to supervise the work being done. And there's a blizzard going on outside, but it's still going to be fun.
That's all. Any other questions? No, seeing none. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today and to share your thoughts. I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for giving me some time. I appreciate it.
Have a great day. Up last, we have I think it's Matthew Forrest. Morning, Mr. Forrest.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Matthew Forrest, and I am the managing partner of Forrest McPadden. We're a law firm and have offices in Weathersfield and Cheshire. Hopefully that hits multiple of your districts. That said, our firm does practice in the area of property damage litigation, not just on a regular basis, but on a daily basis. And in that practice, we represent not just citizens, but also businesses looking to recover and resolve disputes between their insurance policies and the insurance companies so that they can move on with their lives, exactly the intent of having insurance when it happens to all of us. I did send in some formal comments, 1 page, nothing dramatic, and some possible tweaks to the language that's been presented. And the tweaks are as follows. 1, to ensure, as the commissioner said, that the claimant or someone who has a dispute isn't left with the burden of the cost of the arbitration. I didn't see necessarily any language in there that said that they were, but there also wasn't any language that said necessarily that they were not. So as a lawyer, we always like affirmative language rather than having a gap. And I did add a little language in order to ensure that. The second thing I wanted to ensure was when somebody has a property loss and they then have a dispute, there are many losses that do fall when your car gets hit or a truck, or as a business, things happen in the automobile industry, or when you have a crash that affect your businesses. And those also raise their head as a totality of losses that occur during a regular car crash. And those losses, by and large, are handled under this arbitration process. But since we're looking at it specifically in this bill, it was important to ensure that if somebody does have a loss and they want a nice, very litigious, quick resolution between insurance company and a claimant, that those losses that are, as the language I put it, are pertinent or related to the crash itself can be resolved by the arbitration itself. And so I added a couple of the normal things that come up on a daily basis in the litigation across this state while we're resolving these items, and I added them to the language in your bill, and I have given the committee those amendments. We're only talking about 20 or so words. It's not an exhaustive list. But if you were to resolve things for loss of use of vehicles, the property damage itself to vehicles, the valuation of vehicles, other losses relating to the diminished value of your property, if it's a vehicle, if it's a truck. And I'd just like to remind the committee that it's not just many of the people that are in this room right here that perhaps have these losses, which we all do on a daily basis as a society, but it's also the businesses that want to get up and running again. And a lot of those small mom and pop businesses call us all the time. I need to resolve this because I want to get my convenience store back open, and a car, maybe ran into it, those types of things. And I think this arbitration process is great. The Department of Insurance is a very reasonable proposal by them, as I said in the filing. And I would just like to be able to see it be a little bit more comprehensive so the arbitration process can work to its fullest extent, and thereby reducing any of the side litigation that may have to happen. And we can handle everything in a nice, thoughtful way, clearly upfront through the arbitration process. And we both go on our way and we resolve any dispute for the citizens and companies of the state of Connecticut. Other than that, that's my testimony. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Forrest, for your testimony. Are there any questions? Representative Wood.
Thank you, Attorney Forrest, for being here today. I did take your testimony and send it to the insurance department to just get their feedback on it. So I really appreciate that. But I was wondering if you could kind of give us your perspective on, making customers whole and the importance of that, because we're not doing this every day. So if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, please.
Sure. Thank you, Representative Wood. Basically, as you might imagine, if you were involved in a crash, or you own a company with some of your delivery trucks that are involved in a crash, you're a trucker, and your truck, which is your livelihood, is involved in a crash. We get these calls all the time. So in law, we generally say we're creating a set of rules that puts the person in the position they were before the crash. It's pretty reasonable. We also sort of say, as a blanket doctrinal statement, we're trying to make somebody whole. And in order to do that, we have to see what are the items that made this person not whole from the crash. So many times one might think, and if you're sitting there today, you'd say, okay, I have to repair my car and it's $5,000. And you might say, okay, the insurance company wants to pay me $5,000. And that would be good to repair your car. But then now you own a car that's worth less. And under our law in Connecticut, we call that diminished value. So you had this car that was worth 10,000, but maybe now it's only worth 8. And so that's another loss that we have, that one might have. You might also have other losses because you had to pay for a rental car, right? And that would be another loss. So when we want to make somebody whole, we just have to consider all of those things related, of course, to property damage, related, of course, to crashes and losses and perils that happen and that affect the ownership of the vehicle and that are contingent upon that destruction. And so we just want to make sure that we make everybody whole and we include all those losses, or at least we allow the arbitration program to include all the losses that the arbitrator thinks are reasonably connected to the property loss. And so that's what we see on a daily basis of people say, and they tell me all the time, I'm not looking for anything extra, right? I just want to be put in the position I was before. But if we don't include the losses, like the loss of value of your property, and this includes sometimes real property too, oil spills in basements happen, right? Cars going through front doors happen. Taking out, I'm sure that the person in Greenwich, the representative from Greenwich, who has all these beautiful stone walls in front of all these beautiful land. Sometimes those signs and those stone walls are taken out. Very expensive to repair and replace. And those types of things are in addition to and continue to be additional losses that are suffered. So they just say, someone might say, I just want to get the stone wall back. I just want to get my car fixed. I just want to get the loss of right to use or the property paid for. And that's all they're looking for. But if we don't allow the program to fill in all the gaps of all the losses, then we have to have the conversation. Well, maybe we have to go to Superior Court now. But that's not what the arbitration program is designed to, not have to go to Superior Court, to have an easy way to resolve the dispute. So I just want to make sure that was open.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Pablo D'Amato.
Thank you. So this is the department asking for reimbursement from the insurance company. What about the individual, though? There's no possible putting on the individual, just the insurance company? Is that not an option? I just like when both parties have it always, as an attorney also, it always concerns me when you only have one party who possibly has the burden of paying or winning, let's say, attorney's fees. Then it seems to stifle the other side from filing or compromising or all sorts of things. So what is your view on that option?
So three things. The first is that actually each party does have a filing fee that they have to pay. So there's a little skin in the game. The second thing is that I think the state, and I'm going to congratulate the state, I love Connecticut, they have the opt-out, and they say if the insurance company doesn't provide the right offer of compromise, if you're familiar with our rules of practice in civil, they have the offer of compromise in there. And if they say, hey, we offered you this much, we went to arbitration and you were not awarded anymore, then they do not have to pay those arbitration fees. I also don't see any language in here which specifically indicates that there's any attorney's fees available in the section that we were looking at there. There's an appeal process, it indicates later, that's part of the original statute. So I don't think that is necessarily a concern the way it's currently drafted. It would be my review of the language.
Okay. And I did see that if the claimant rejected and there's a equal or higher offer, that's the exception. So I do like that language, but I'll review your language as well. I appreciate your input. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you very much for your time.
Appreciate it. I think that's it, right? We don't have anyone else? Okay, well, next time and date will be announced. Thank you all for coming and for testifying. What's that? Oh, yes. We have our flood insurance hearing, which is Thursday at 10 o'clock. I hope you all come to that. It's a very important public hearing. Informational hearing we're hoping to have to discuss some of the flooding issues we've been dealing with in Connecticut. So I hope you all can come on Thursday. Thanks. This meeting is adjourned.